Welcome to Module 1.2, Defining the Project Requirements and Budget. This course was developed as part of the project Community-Led Designs for Specialized Housing in the North, which received funding from the Housing Supply Challenge Getting Started round. However, the views expressed are the personal views of the author, and CMHC accepts no responsibility for them. This course is being offered in partnership with the Faculty of Community Services at Toronto Metropolitan University, as well as Wausau Distance Education Centre. Throughout the next few modules, we will be reviewing the planning procurement phase. We will be starting and focusing on the needs identification and project requirements. By the end of Module 1.2, you will be able to answer the following questions. How should you approach defining project requirements, including outlining the project scope and setting constraints? What is the purpose of a preliminary budget and how can you best estimate costs? What is project risk and how is it measured? Needs identification and project requirements. There are several steps at the beginning of the project that require gathering information and making decisions. Some of these choices can vary depending on if you have building drawings or specifications ready, if you are looking to have a new building designed, or if you are selecting from a design catalog. This can impact many elements of a project, including the total project budget and timelines or schedules, the form of project delivery, the type of construction contract, preparation of construction and bid documents, and how you tender the contract. Whether you have a set of construction plans ready, you still need to consider the project scope, goals, schedule or timeline, project budget, and estimated cost, as well as any potential constraints. Project requirements must be agreed upon by the project team or the project owner and defined in order to prepare a tender package. This allows all interested parties or bidders to submit applications with a clear understanding of the work required, and all bidders have access to the same information. The project scope is a written document that summarizes key goals and details of the project. The length and format can vary, but should include the project goals, what will be achieved, what the community needs will the project satisfy, the deliverables, what will be produced at the end of the project, the division of responsibilities, how will the deliverables be produced and by whom, the cost and funding resources available, time constraints, quality standards and inspection requirements, and an assessment of risk. Whenever possible, all elements of the scope are clear and measurable. Here is a template that you can use to define the scope of your project. This template was also used in the project management course. What we will talk about is the categories under the scope and how you can use this tool for future projects. This template is available for you to download and utilize when developing the scope of the project. Within this template, you can outline the things that were described in the previous slide, including goals, deliverables, responsibilities of each party, cost, time, and quality standards. When working to define project terms or project scope, it is important to recognize constraints. Some examples of common constraints faced in construction projects are access to materials and the lack of storage for materials, access to the transportation of materials, commonly experienced in remote NAN communities who utilize the winter road system, access to machinery, access to skilled labor, timeline restrictions due to weather and seasonality, again, those who utilize the winter road system, or when dealing with flooding and forest fires. soil conditions, inflexible budgets, and community opposition. Setting a preliminary budget. The budget is the money available and allocated to complete a project. While project costs can be overestimated, they should never go over budget. Surpassing the project's budget involves finding additional sources of financing which can slow or stop the completion of the project. A budget is typically created in the initial phase of the project because money is available or is part of a grant application. A separate budget may be needed for preparing the tendering package along with the main budget for the project. Budgets should include contingencies, typically about 20 to 30%, to allow for unforeseen cost increases during construction. I would like to highlight the third point in the slide because preparing a proper tender package is a fair amount of work that requires significant time commitments and sometimes requires external support or resources. How to develop a preliminary cost estimate. There are different ways to approach preliminary cost estimates depending on the project type and scale. Past project information can provide a valuable resource to determine an approximate cost. Maintaining information on past project costs help to document general cost per unit, which can be used to establish future budgets. If a project is several years old, inflation or rising construction costs should be taken into consideration. Past projects should be reviewed for challenges such as unexpected cost or overruns. Budget allocations or contingencies may need to be updated. Consultants or design professionals who are familiar with construction costs can provide estimates. However, one of the best ways to estimate cost is to look at past project information. Let's take a look at one example. When we say maintaining information on past project cost help to document general cost per unit, if we look at a house that is approximately 1,600 square feet and costs a total of $450,000 to build, we are looking at an approximate cost of $282 per square foot. Now, if we wanted to build a 5-bedroom house that is now 2,200 square feet, we could use that same dollar per square foot value multiplied by $282 per square foot times, say, 2,500 square feet, it will be around $700,000. This is a very basic way to calculate this information, but sometimes that's the best way to do things if you have the total cost of past projects. You can also use consultants or design professionals to provide costing information. Many architecture firms or engineering firms can complete this work for you. There are also manuals out there that will provide you with cost unit information. Getting this piece right is a big part of the future success of your project. So why do preliminary cost estimates matter? Cost control is greatest at the beginning of a project when the project scope is being defined. Once a project is approved and pre-construction begins, it is much more difficult to control costs. I would think about this as a boulder rolling down the hill. As you roll down the hill, the boulder is going faster and your costs keep going higher. If you don't have a handle on what the total cost is going to be at the beginning, you may find yourself in a place where you are at 80% completion and have run out of budget. There is a balance between making sure you have enough budget and being realistic with the costs. This is why your best mentor or guides are people in the community who have done this type of project before and have the information on past project costs, or relying on the external resources of consultants, architects, architects and engineers. It is also important to identify any potential risks. What risks exist within the project scope? Analyzing those risks and what is known about the risks. Measuring the risk severity, how likely is it that the risk will occur, and how would the project be impacted? Developing risk response and mitigation plans. If the risk does occur, how will we respond? How will this impact the project? Let's review a couple risks that are typical for construction projects. Risks can be internal or external. Some examples of the types of risk include aggressive schedules, complicated technical drawings, shifting in political support, and high staff turnover. Some external risks could include winter road access, material shortages, inflation and associated cost overruns, and the reliability of contractors. There are some potential risks that a construction project carries that can have major impacts on the budget, timeline, or the quality of the project. Planning responses to risk. Most often, risk is identified, analyzed, and evaluated through a combination of discussing the complexity of a specific project and reflecting on experience with past projects. Once risks are identified and evaluated, it is the responsibility of the project manager to clarify the risk response or contingency plans required to proceed with the project. The level of risk should be communicated to owners and managers or other decision makers, along with the overall feasibility of the project and the strategies they have developed to manage the risk. One example of a strategy to mitigate risk at this stage would be defining project timelines and budgets in tender documents with contingency funds or buffer periods. For more information and detailed explanation about project scoping, budgeting, and assessing risks, see the course modules from Introduction to Construction Project Management for Housing and NAN Communities, reviewing modules 1.1, Defining and Scoping the Project, 1.2, Feasibility and Costs, and 1.3, Assessing Risk. Here are the references and resources used to develop this module.